Great, thank you, everybody. So welcome to the fourth class in our sessions on using the PBCore metadata standard. Today is going to be kind of a combination of review and practical tool session. We're going to be focusing on the use of the PBCore cataloging tool, which is an application that is available on the PBCore website. You should all have had the opportunity to download the tool in advance. The downloads are available in the course folder. If you haven't already downloaded the tool, please go ahead and take a minute to do that now, because what I'm going to ask is, as we go through today's class, is if you guys can do your best to follow along with me as I demo the use of the tool and kind of walk through again the structures and capabilities of PBCore using the tool as an example, because I do think it provides kind of a better sense of the structure of PBCore and the ways that the PBCore record can be kind of layered and can cover multi-part assets and instantiations than the kind of flat representations of PBCore that we've been using so far. Thank you, Kim, for posting a link to the folder in the chat. If you haven't had a chance, like I said, please just go to the folder and go ahead and download the PBCore tool. There are binaries available for both Windows and Mac machines. And let us know if you have any difficulties in the chat. So once again, thank you to NEDCC for hosting these webinars and to NEH for providing the grant that funds them. And PBCore was originally created by CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and is currently maintained by GBH, my place of employ. So pretty soon, I'm actually going to switch over from this PowerPoint and go to a live demo of the PBCore tool. I will have the PowerPoint still available. The PowerPoint that's available in the class folder will walk through all of the tasks that we are going to perform in the PBCore tool today. And as I'm going through the tool, I'm going to take the opportunity to kind of talk through how it represents PBCore. But just to kind of quickly go over what we'll be doing in the first half hour of the class, we're going to be using the PBCore cataloging tool. So first, we're going to set it up. We're going to create a folder where records are going to be saved as you create them. We're going to walk through creating an asset in the cataloging tool. We're going to create an instantiation in the cataloging tool. We're going to create those kind of basic level records, as we already talked about, what the minimum viable record in PBCore is and what the required assets are to create that record. Then we're going to add more elements and we're going to add more attributes to really build out those records and kind of show the full capacity of PBCore. We're going to walk through the use of controlled vocabularies and how the cataloging tool enables that, and how users can add or edit their own controlled vocabularies in addition to those that PBCore provides. We're going to save and search for records. We're going to use the cataloging tool's advanced search function. We're going to walk quickly through the batch edit feature. And we're going to touch on creating spreadsheets and opening from spreadsheets, because that is a feature that can be useful. And then we're going to pause for questions. And once we've done that, that should take about, up to about halfway through the class period. And then we're going to do another group exercise. And similar to last week, we're going to go into breakout groups. We're going to take about 10 minutes to use the cataloging tool to create a sample record based on the case study that will be provided in your breakout groups. Then we're going to talk about them in the breakout groups, and then we're going to come back together, talk about what we learned by doing the tool, answer any more questions about the tool, and then we're going to just kind of talk through what the last class will be. So thank you, everybody. And now I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a second, or I'm actually going to end. I'm not going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to end the slideshow. And you should now see on the desktop that I'm sharing the opening page of the PBCore cataloging tool. Can everybody see that on my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. So for those of you following along, go ahead and launch the PBCore cataloging tool on your own computers. And we're just going to walk through how to use it. So the first time you open the PBCore cataloging tool, you'll get this page that looks like this, or you might get a prompt that asks you to set a directory that you're going to use for directory crawling. This is where we set a folder that the app will use to look for PBCore records. So the way that the app works is that it creates PBCore records in a user-friendly format, and while you are typing in the data, it's creating on the back end an XML record, and that XML record is being saved in a folder that you designate, and the tool will search in that record, in that folder, for the PBCore records that are created. So I can add a folder from my computer. Right now, sample records is where I put most of my records. For those of you following along, you should be able to create or set a folder on your computer where you're going to want to save any records that you create. And if you have any difficulty with any of the steps as I'm walking through them, let me know in the chat, and we'll see if we can work it out. All right, so I've set a folder. I'm gonna close this window. And now I'm just gonna start by, if you're not prompted to create a folder, then you should be able to go down to settings and go to directory crawling. And clicking that directory crawling menu will bring up this directory crawling window. And you can click add folder and select a folder there. Once you click add folder, you can either make a new folder or select a folder that's already in existence. So once that's set, that's kind of the preliminary step, just so that you can, save and search your records. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new description document. So that's under the file menu. I'm going to hit new description document. And this will bring up a description document window that, as you can see, is pre-populated with the 3 elements that are required to create a PBCore asset record. So that's a PBCore identifier, title, and description. And what you see that we have in the tool, this little alarm sign next to those 3 assets. And each of those, once I fill it in, that alarm sign will go away. So to go back to my Star Wars example, let's say I'm cataloging a copy of Star Wars A New Hope. I filled in the title, and now it's no longer yelling at me because that required element has been filled in. Once I fill in a description, and once I fill in an identifier, then all of those should go away. However, you'll notice that this identifier symbol, identifier asset, still has the alarm symbol next to it. That's because identifier actually has a required attribute as well. So if I look down to where the element attributes are, I can see that there's still a value missing sign. And so I'm going to add a source. Source attribute is going to be GBH, because this is an imaginary barcode that I created here at GBH. And now I've got no more alarm signs. I have created a basic level PBCore record. This is a minimum viable PBCore asset record. This includes all of the elements that are needed to make a valid asset record. And if I click over here, you see that we have visual layout. If I click over here to XML layout, I will actually see the XML version of this record that's being created as I type it. I'll go over saving the documents in a moment, but this is the actual record. This is the visual version of the record the tool creates for me to make it easier to see what data I'm putting in. If I wanted to create an instantiation record, instead of clicking new description document, I would hit new instantiation document. For a new instantiation document, again, I have these little alarms. It requires me to add an instantiation identifier. And similarly, I need to add a source before it's valid and an instantiation location. And there we go. Now I've created a viable instantiation document. So asset document, instantiation document. Technically, I am done. This is all that I need to do to have created my records. But obviously, in most cases, I'm going to want to add more data than that. So jumping back to my asset document. So I know that I have a copy of Star Wars A New Hope. I know that I have a description and an identifier, but I also want to add another element that says that George Lucas is the creator. So once I click this little plus sign here, it'll bring up this add new element window, and I can select any of the elements within PBCore and add it to my record. So if I add, and you see how many of these elements that have sub-elements have a little drop-down menu next to them that allows me to add a sub-element within the window as well. So let's say I want to add a creator. Now you remember from a couple weeks ago that creator is a container element. You can't put any data directly within the creator field. And here, when the asset window pops up, it will tell you that the PBCore creator element is a container for sub-elements creator and creator role. I want to actually add data, so I'm going to go ahead and add that creator from the submenu. I hit add and close. And now you'll see that what the tool actually did for me is it created both the container element, which is required to use the sub-element, and then that sub-element within it. And this all appeared in this optional elements field below the required elements in PBCore. Now, since I've added these elements, right now they're blank, and so I have these little alarm symbols that tell me that because I haven't added any data in creator, this is not really valid PBCore. I'm going to add Lucas George. And that should value not matching any of the controlled vocabularies defined for this element. It's true. But this won't prevent me from saving the record because I don't need a controlled vocabulary to add a creator. I can just do it from my own brain, or I can add another controlled term from outside. So that's what this warning symbol is telling me, is it doesn't match a controlled vocabulary, but this will not prevent me from saving the document or creating a legal PBCore record. So now I've added a creator. I can add any other elements that I would like. I could add a asset type. And if I wanted to actually see the controlled vocabularies that were available to me, I could hit that little magnifying glass, and this would provide me a controlled vocabulary term list from within PBCore. Well, this seems like a program. Really, film should be in here. But of the controlled vocabulary terms I have, program best summarizes it. So I'm going to select program, and that will enter program as my element value. If I wanted to add an attribute, I would go down below the value and I would hit. So right now, because I hit program, which is from the controlled vocabulary list within PBCore, it's going to tell me that it's auto-filled that the source of this asset type is PBCore. I could add another attribute if I wanted, and it'll give me all the attributes that are available within the asset type list. I don't actually feel like I need to add any other attributes here, but you remember that discussion that we had the other week about the many titles of Star Wars and what kind of title types we want to have. So I'm going to hit add attribute, and I'm sorry that it's taking a second every time to make the window come up. That is actually because it's opening in my other desktop and I'm dragging it back so you guys can see it. So I hit add attribute. I can add a new attribute. I've got a lot more attributes available on the title field, so I'm going to add a title type attribute. Hit add and close. And I'm going to say this title type is a revised title, because as we remember, the original title for this film was Star Wars, and the Star Wars A New Hope title was something that was added later on for different versions of the film. So now I have this title type, and if I wanted, I could go ahead and add a second title. And all of I'm not going to do all of the ones that we talked about yesterday, but I'm going to add Star Wars, and I'm going to call that the original title. And that will keep track of the different descriptive information that I want to have in my record. Now, what if instead of having a separate instantiation document, I wanted to add an instantiation directly to my record? I can actually do that here within the asset record field as well. So if I want to say that this copy that I have of Star Wars is a VHS, the element that I would use to say that is in the instantiation, it's within the instantiation layer, not the asset layer. So I'm going to go ahead and add an instantiation physical. This is a VHS tape, and it'll provide me the definition of the instantiation physical element. I'm going to hit add and close. And as with creator, you'll see that adding an instantiation identifier immediately adds all of the kind of required surrounding information that you need to add an instantiation within PBCore. So it's going to add, clicking and saying that I want to add an instantiation physical will immediately create the container element instantiation, and it will also prompt me to fill in an instantiation identifier and an instantiation location, which are, as you remember, the required elements for an instantiation. So I've got an instantiation. I'm going to add my instantiation identifier. I'm going to add my instantiation location. And now I'm going to go ahead and add from my controlled vocabulary the term that I want. I have this tape as a VHS. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, I'm having a hard time. There's so many possible answers in my controlled vocabulary field. Well, I know that I want a VHS. So if I want to see whether it's in my controlled vocabulary field, I can just start typing and select VHS from the drop-down list. And again, it will autofill that source attribute as PBCore because this came from a PBCore controlled vocabulary. So I've created a record. I've added an instantiation to that record. If I had 2 instantiations of this record, I could do the same thing. I could say I also have a DVD version of this film. And so I might add another instantiation physical, which is going to create a whole nother instantiation layer on this record. And I can add my instantiation. I did this my second instantiation. It's also held at WGBH. And this is a DVD. All right, and I've added my DVD. And now in my record, you'll see if I go to the XML, I have all of the information that is about the content of this film up on the top layer. And I have my 2 instantiations contained within this record as well. Although I seem to have a typo in one of them. Let's see what's going on there. There we go. So that's basically how I would use the PBCore cataloging tool to create a record. And I've showed you how I would use these controlled vocabulary terms. But now, as I've said above, I really think that the asset type of this particular record should be film and not program. And at my institution, I want to ensure that I have the ability to describe a piece of media as a film and not a program. I actually have the option to go and edit the controlled vocabulary. So the PBCore cataloging tool comes pre-installed with all of the controlled vocabularies that are native to PBCore. So you'll remember that these are elements and attribute vocabularies, instantiation media type, instantiation physical, PBCore asset type. All of these controlled vocabularies are included by default within the app. But I also have the option to add a new vocabulary term. You'll see that when I've done demos before, I've added terms such as tutorial, new term, that was not a very inspired one, home movie. So I'm going to go ahead and add the vocabulary term film. And I'm going to define the source for that vocabulary term as GBH because this is a local vocabulary term. I'm using it within my institution. And it's not something that is included right now in the official list of PBCore terms. Going to add that. And now, once I close that, if I change this and I start searching for my asset type controlled vocabulary terms, film comes up as an option. And I'm going to select it. And now it autofills film as my PBCore asset type. And it should autofill the source as GBH, because that's what I put in my controlled vocabulary settings when I was adding terms to the controlled vocabulary. I could also do this. You remember we talked some last week about controlled vocabularies that we might want to use that were not, included in the PBCore controlled vocabulary list at all. So if I wanted to use a genre vocabulary that came from the Library of Congress, I could add a new item to the controlled vocabulary list. And it would give me a list of elements, and I could say, all right, I want to add a genre vocabulary. Oops, I think I already did this as an example, so it'll tell me that the element is already available in the controlled vocabulary list. And I've added some terms within the genre list, and right now I put the source of these as WGBH. But if I wanted to actually pull these from the Library of Congress, I could list the source as the Library of Congress. There's also an export and import controlled vocabularies feature. It does this through JSON. I'm not going to walk through this now because our time is relatively short. But if that's something you're interested in doing, we can talk about that later as how you would actually do that. I see that there's a question about whether there's any way to sort the vocabulary. So I believe that within the controlled vocabulary, let's take a look at my vocabulary. Nope, I can't sort the vocabulary list from within the app itself. The way you would have to do that because so the list in itself is alphabetically organized, but if you add new terms, then they're going to come in the order that you added them, and there isn't really a way to move them up or down the line. But you can export the controlled vocabulary field, arrange it the way you would like to see it, and then re-import it so that it is then re-alphabetized or what have you. Not ideal, but unfortunately, that's what we've got as an option for that right now. So I've added a controlled vocabulary term. I'm creating the record the way that I would like to create the record. Now I would like to save the record that I've created. So you'll see here, this red Save Document button. I'm going to hit Save Document. It will automatically open the folder that I have set as the place to save records. I'm going to save this as Star Wars: A New Hope .xml. Now I'm going to close this record. How am I going to find it again from within the tool? So the PBCore cataloging tool has a search function. And if I open New Search, this window will pop open that allows you, the tool will automatically scan the records where I have been saving the files and basically just do a full text search for the term that I've determined. So if I search for Star Wars, hit the search button, and you'll see I've used this Star Wars: A New Hope example a couple times before because I have several different versions of Star Wars: A New Hope documents. I actually have 2 pages worth of them. Here's the one of the ones that I've saved previously, Star Wars: A New Hope, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Going to open this record. This is not actually the one I just created. I think in order to index the one that I just created, I would have to close the app and open it again. But that's how the search function works, is I just search. I will do a new search, scans my folders, and it finds all the records that have that containing field. Now, if I wanted to do something a little more complex, there actually is a more complex search feature. So say that I wanted to search for every record that was a VHS tape within my collection. Sorry, I'm just going to rearrange this so that the search field is up top again. So I could just search VHS, or I could go to the advanced search field, which will give me the option of searching only within specific fields of PBCore. By default, everything is auto-selected, so it's going to search all these fields. I'm going to unselect all, and then I'm going to say I only want to search VHS within the instantiation physical field. So I'm going to search for instantiation physical. I'm going to hit, all right, search for VHS within instantiation physical. I'm going to add that. I'm going to hit my search. And it's actually, it should give me anything that has VHS within the instantiation physical element. And it's not giving me anything right now. So because it hasn't re-indexed that record that had VHS as an instantiation physical, nothing is coming up. But that's how the advanced search function would work. Or if I wanted to search for anything that had Nova in the title field, select all and deselect all just to get rid of that VHS. This is also an example I've used a time or two. So title, gonna add Nova and see if anything comes up. And here's everything that I have that has Nova listed as a title in the record. And I can open it from here. I'm going to close the search, and you'll see this is a record that I created previously. It has a lot more descriptive data than the one that we just created now in the class. And because it included Nova in the title field, it brought this record up when I ran the search. And I could do more complex searches as well. So I can create records. I can search for records. A couple bonus features that the PBCore cataloging tool provides, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, is you can actually batch edit open documents. Say that I was working on a collection and I wanted to add that all of the records in this collection were housed at GBH. but I didn't want to go through and manually add instantiation location GBH to every single record. I could add a new instantiation across all the records that I have open and say the instantiation location for this record is WGBH. And then I would save it across my documents, and you'll see that, sorry, accidentally closed that. Oh, where'd my PBCore app go? One moment, I'm gonna pull back my presentation while I reopen the PBCore app. Here we go, PBCore cataloging tool back again. And it reopened my batch edit. I'm gonna hit batch editing. Here, let me try this again. Close this window, reopen it. Gonna batch edit open documents. Let's say I want to add that every open document is from the series Nova. So the element value is Nova. I can add an attribute to go along with that element. I'm going to add the title type is series. I'm going to save documents. And it's going to bring up a window to ensure it says that adding elements to open files. By proceeding, all the elements will be added to the currently open documents where possible. No elements will be replaced. Only repeatable or non-existing elements on the files will be added. They'll ask me if I want to proceed. I'll say OK. And I'll go back and I'll see that I have a new title type series that I just added right now. So you'll see that because I actually did this example before, title Nova title type series appears twice on this record. I can delete one of them out and resave the document, but that's how I would do a batch edit. And that's intended to make it a little bit easier when you're working with documents. If you're working with a collection of material that all have certain things in common, but you want to change the descriptions on all of them, for example, or you might want to change the titles, but you don't want to have to manually add and re-add every element. The last feature I'm going to demo is this import and export from CSV feature. So the first thing that I can do is convert open files to a CSV file. I can save this file as, I'm going to save it for now as demo.csv. It will save automatically to the folder that I've designated as the folder to save my records. And then once I reopen that CSV, one moment. I just need a second to open this with Excel. Here we go. And so I've got one record that had some limited data. Because the CSV file needs to contain all the possible elements and attributes within PBCore, you'll see that it has a lot of additional fields, most of which won't be filled out when the data is exported to CSV. Unfortunately, the tool isn't quite smart enough to only export the fields that are actually filled out. It will export everything with all possible blank elements. If I scroll over, here's everything that went out to the CSV. So this is kind of the downside of importing and exporting from CSV, is you end up with a lot of blank fields. But it can be a way to get the data in a format that is something that can be copied and pasted and imported, copied over to other CSVs or import fields, and makes it easier to ingest and export to and from different applications from the PBCore XML records. I also have the opportunity to import from CSV. And what will happen when I import from a CSV, so if I convert CSV file to XML, here's demo.csv, there's the one record in there. I will open that again. Again, this is a little bit of a drawback in the tool is that automatically the records will be saved as imported from CSV 1, 2, 3, etc. So before I import and rewrite this record imported from CSV 1, I'm going to save this as a different record. I'm going to save it as Nova example. And then when I import from CSV, I'm going to import demo from CSV. I'm going to open it. Select it will tell me that the selected CSV file was converted to XML files. And then I'm going to open my record imported from CSV1. And that will be the same. You can see that because this is the record that I exported and then exported to CSV and then imported to CSV. And you will see that these records are identical. And if I wanted to import another record from CSV, I would save this as something else. There's a question, how does the CSV deal with repeated fields? Good question. So one of the reasons that we have all those blank fields within the CSV is so that it can actually have the opportunity to do multiple titles or multiple title types. Let me see, does this one have any repeated fields? It does not. Let me add another title. So right now we have the title Nova series. I'm going to add title. And I'm going to add black hole apocalypse. I'm going to add attribute title type program. And I'm going to go ahead and export this record to CSV. So let me close this just so we get the one for a demo. Convert open files to CSV file. We're going to call this demo2.csv. I'm going to open demo2.csv. Open with Microsoft Excel. And you see that we have title 1, title type. Now it should have given me a title 2 and title type 2. But it looks like it didn't do that. So that is something that we should check out with the developers of the tool to make sure that this will work as expected. Because we should have the opportunity to add multiple versions of a title within the tool. So good question, Marcos, and something for us to check out within the tool. John Levin, great question about the import CSV files and whether that also requires the blank columns. It does require the blank columns. And one of the things that we actually have up on our website, which I will go to in just a moment. Great, thank you, Peter. So if you go to pbcore.org/spreadsheet templates, you'll see here that the many templates that are available range from a simple template designed to provide the simplest version of PBCore to inventory purposes to a full PBCore spreadsheet template, which represents PBCore in the fullest extent possible in a flat spreadsheet format, which is designed specifically for use with the PBCore cataloging tool. So one of the things that we recommend if you want to go from a spreadsheet into PBCore XML documents is to, once you import, the tool will know to leave blank fields alone and not create those as blank elements or assets. It will only take fields that have data filled in. So if you're using the full PBCore spreadsheet template, I would recommend to use a simpler template to actually use your cataloging and then just copy and paste the data into the relevant fields into the PBCore spreadsheet template if you want to do that ingest. We're running a little short on time, and I do want to make sure that we have plenty of time for the exercise. But the one last thing that I'm going to show you that is a little bit easier to demo in the cataloging tool than in flat data is in previous classes, I've mentioned that PBCore has a part functionality. So I'm going to create a new record, new description document. Now say I've used the example before of a box set. If I wanted to create a record for a box set, and the box set itself is, something like full Star Wars trilogy, original trilogy. And then I wanted to create records for each element, each DVD within the box set. I could add the element PBCore part. And adding the element PBCore part gives me the ability to add a whole new sublayer set of PBCore elements. So I can add a new title. And this title could be A New Hope. And then if I wanted to add another one, then I would add another PBCore part, or I could just add a PBCore title from within PBCore part. And then this one would be The Empire Strikes Back. And you can see on my sample record here that I basically get these little sub-records within the description document that are described as part of the whole. And that is a really powerful tool to be able to describe complex media that includes many segments or different pieces or different sub-instantiations and things like that, because you can also use part on the instantiation level. All right. At this point, I'd like us to go into our breakout groups and just start playing around with the tool and working on the exercise. While I pull the exercise up, does anybody have more questions about the use of the tool? So the exercise that we're going to do, as in last week, we're all going to break up into 4 groups. Each group is going to have a case study that includes information about a piece of media that exists in at least 2 different formats. What I'm going to ask you to do is take 10 minutes to create a record for your media in PBCore and include instantiation records for both formats. So stop and show. As you remember, in the tool, when you create a new document, you can fill out all the description document layers up here, and you have the option to add new instantiations by clicking on that little add element button and going from within the instantiation menu to either just add a new instantiation at the top level and then add new instantiation elements. So we're going to spend 10 minutes doing that. Then we're going to come back together and we're going to spend the remaining, let's see, it's 1:07 now. So doing the 10 minutes will take us to 1:17. And I'd like us to come back together at 1:25. So we're going to spend the remaining 7 or 8 minutes talking about that exercise within our groups and how it went and comparing the records that we made. And if people feel comfortable screen sharing their records, I'd like people to be willing to do that if they can. So Peter, if you'd be up for launching the breakout groups now, that would be great. And we're going to go tackle the exercise. We're recording again for the last couple minutes of the class. So I will talk about some of the things that are going to be different with next class. It is the last class. But first, I just want to take a minute and ask everybody how that exercise went, how you felt about it, what things you thought were interesting, what differences there were in their records. Any questions or things you want to talk about?
Our group had a question about the extra credit of you have a vinyl copy of the basement tapes and you make an MP3 copy. How do you how would you refer to that additional instantiation?
Great question. So that would really depend on whether you were doing one record for your whole digital instantiation, or if you wanted to make individual instantiations for those MP3 files. So you could actually, this would be maybe a great use case for instantiation part, where you create a new instantiation. And that instantiation, sorry, there's a whole bunch. I should probably just done a cleaning record for this. We add a new instantiation that's an MP3 or digital record, new instantiation digital. So I could do a digital file that contains all songs. I wouldn't do this in instantiation digital, but that's the way that I could do it. Or I could do within this instantiation, I could do a bunch of instantiation parts and have an instantiation record for each song. So instantiation part 1, and then this might be my instantiation identifier might be basement tapes 1, instantiation part 2.
totally not how I was going to approach it, but this makes sense.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it, which is one of the great and terrifying things about PBCore. What was the way that your group was going to approach it?
My guess was just to create an album as the instantiation and not break it into separate songs. Although that was suggested, and that is possible, obviously, for kind of ease of record keeping. I was thinking of, we're gonna store these intellectually as an album.
Yeah, that's definitely a way to do it. It really would depend on the use case of your organization. I see there's a question of reorganizing the order of the optional elements. Unfortunately, we do not have a way to do that within the tool. The optional elements appear as they appear. You can see that they will show up in the order that they're kind of dictated by the XML in the actual record. But when they come up here under optional elements, they will show up in the order that the tool dictates that they show up, rather than the order that a human dictates that they show up. Does anybody else have any questions about the tool or any thoughts about the exercise? All right, I'm going to go ahead and talk about our next and last class. So let me go back to the slideshow. So one thing that I would like to remind everybody is that we do not have class next week. Our next class is going to be 2 weeks from now. NEDCC has an event next week, so we're pushing back. And that class 2 weeks from now is going to be, instead of doing the format of a lecture and an exercise as we've done before, we're going to take the first part of class. We're going to be focusing on how to use PBCore within databases and in real world use cases, and to do crosswalks between other metadata standards. And then we're going to talk through some use cases that have been contributed by the class, to talk through, kind of what those might look like in the real world and how one might use PBCore in those scenarios. So we're going to be all together. We're not going to be splitting up into groups. We're not going to be doing our own work. A couple of people have already contributed use cases. A couple other people have volunteered to. I'm going to be reaching out to you in the next couple of weeks to see if you want to contribute. If you didn't in the original pre-survey offer to contribute a use case, but you're interested in doing so now after having walked through the class, reach out to me and I'd be happy to do it. I'm also happy to talk through use cases or questions about PBCore off class, if there's things that you want to do with PBCore, but don't necessarily want to use it as a class exercise. So that's what next week is going to be. In the meantime, I encourage you to go back to the PBCore tool and to these use cases. All 4 exercises should be available in the class, so play around with them. See how much you can push PBCore to its limit. If you feel like sending me the records that you make to look at, I'd be happy, as I have been with other classes, to look at them and answer any questions about things you found confusing, or just take a look and say, great job, well done. That's a fantastic PBCore record. Thank you guys all again for joining me, and I will see you all in 2 weeks. That's going to be, once again, same time on Wednesday. I believe it is I have to check my calendar. I don't want to tell you guys the wrong date, the 27th, for our final PBCore class. Thanks, everyone. Have a